July 17th, 2022, Greenwood Park Mall, Indiana. Families shopping, kids in the food court, it's a normal Sunday. Then a gunman walks in with a rifle and 2 handguns and opens fire. 3 people died in that first few seconds. And then, something the media buried happened. A 22-year-old named Elijah Dickin was there with his girlfriend. No law enforcement training, no military background. Just a legally carried handgun and the instinct to act. He engaged the shooter from over 40 yards, fired 10 rounds and 8 connected. The threat was over in 15 seconds. Police Chief Jim Ison stood at the podium that next day and said it plainly. Many more people would have died if not for a responsible armed citizen. 1 man, 1 gun, a food court full of people who went home to their families. Now here's the part that should make your blood run cold. The FBI's official report, the one politicians cite when they write gun laws, claimed that during that same period, armed civilians stopped 0 active shooters. Not fewer than Dickin, 0. That's not a rounding error. Researchers have proven it's a pattern. The FBI was asked to fix it and they refused. So who benefits when the government erases the good guys from the record? Coming up, I'm going to show you exactly how this affects you, your family, and the rights you carry every day. Think about your day yesterday. Grocery store, school pickup, church, gas station. Was there a cop within 30 seconds of you at any point? Probably not. The average response time to an active shooting is 5 to 11 minutes. The average mass shooting is over in under 6 minutes. You do the math. By the time the siren is close, the worst has already happened. This isn't a knock on law enforcement. They run towards what everyone else runs from. That takes real courage. But courage doesn't close the time gap. Distance does. And the only thing that closes distances instantly is a legally armed person already in the room. This matters to your safety. Your church, your kid's school, the parking lot outside your gym. All of it exists in that gap between the 911 call and the moment boots hit pavement. That gap is your life. This matters to your freedom. Right now, billionaire-backed lobbying groups are funding a push to restrict your right to carry, using data that researchers have proven is deliberately incomplete. They're using numbers they know are wrong to write laws that affect your constitutional rights. They've been told they're wrong. They're just choosing to keep the numbers anyway. This matters to your future. Every unchallenged bad data point becomes the foundation of the next piece of legislation. Every buried story shifts public perception a little further towards the idea that you, a law-abiding gun owner, are the problem. But you're not the problem. You might actually be the only solution standing between your family and a very bad day. The people writing these laws, they know that. That's exactly why they need you to believe otherwise. But before I show you the data they've buried, I want to do something most people in this space won't. I'm going to give the other side the strongest argument they have. If you can't beat the strongest version of an argument, you haven't beaten the argument. So here's the most compelling case against armed civilian intervention. Defensive gun use estimates are wildly inconsistent. Some studies say 60,000 incidents a year, others say 2.5 million. That's not a data dispute, that's a chasm. When numbers vary by a factor of 40, it's reasonable for policymakers to be cautious. A 2025 JAMA study found that over 91% of gun owners reported no lifetime history of defensive gun use. And Elijah Dickin was exceptional. Accurate shots from 40 yards away under lethal stress. Most concealed carriers aren't him. The concern that an untrained civilian could misidentify a threat or complicate a law enforcement response is legitimate. It deserves a real answer. The leave it to professionals argument is this. Standardized training, chain of command, and legal accountability produce better outcomes than a self-selected group of armed individuals operating on instinct. That logic works in a controlled environment. A food court in Indiana on a Sunday is not a controlled environment. Here's where their argument falls apart. The professionals will handle it position assumes the professionals will be there. The data says they won't, not in time, and it assumes the official numbers on armed civilian intervention are accurate. But they're not, and that's not opinion. That's what researchers found when they put the FBI numbers next to documented reality. The spin they're selling, armed civilian intervention, is rare, risky, and unreliable. What they're not telling you, the official data was built to look that way. So let's pull back the curtain on how that data gets made and what it's hiding. This isn't one mistake, it's a system. The FBI isn't getting this wrong by accident. Between 2022 and 2024, the FBI reported just 3 incidents of armed civilians stopping active shooters. 3 in 2 years. But the Crime Prevention Research Center documented 78 over that same period. That's a 26-to-1 discrepancy. It gets worse. The FBI's report covering 2023 and 2024 identified 72 active shooting cases and claimed armed civilians stopped none of them. The CPRC found 121 actual cases, and 45 were stopped by armed citizens. 8 of those would almost certainly have been mass casualty events without civilian intervention. The FBI was told about these errors. Researchers handed them the full documentation list. The FBI's own compilers objected to just 2 cases and still didn't update the official numbers. Bureaucratic sloppiness produces random errors. These errors go in one direction every single time. They erase the armed citizen. Studies consistently average 1.82 million defensive gun uses per year, compared to 1.1 million reported violent crimes. Civilians are 4.8 times more likely to use a gun defensively than to be murdered by one. And here's a number that should lead every newscast and never does. After Sandy Hook, President Obama ordered the CDC to study gun violence. He expected data that would support restrictions. But that's not what he got. Instead, the CDC found defensive gun uses could reach 3 million per year, roughly 8,200 every day. That report was shelved. The president who ordered it never mentioned it publicly. The deterrence data is just as significant. Surveys of convicted felons show 56% would not attack a victim they suspected was armed. That's not gun owners talking. That's criminals. Armed potential victims change criminal behavior, and those deterred crimes never show up in any statistic. In May 2025, Dr. John Lott and Lott-Moody published a peer-reviewed study comparing civilian and police interventions across 11 years of active shooting data. The conclusion? Armed civilians with carry permits reduced casualties more than responding police, stopped attacks more frequently, and faced lower risk of being killed or injured themselves. Why? Because they were already there. There are roughly 671,000 full-time sworn officers in the U.S. With a third on duty at any time, that's about 233,000 officers protecting 340 million people. That's less than 0.1% of the population. In 2024, 21.5 million Americans held concealed carry permits. The armed citizen is already inside the building. The officer is still inside the car. Between 2014 and 2024, armed civilians stopped at least 157 active shooter incidents, ending 35% of them before the police arrived. In areas where carry is legal, armed citizens stopped over 51% of active shootings. Police stopped 44.6% in comparable scenarios. The good guy with a gun is not a talking point. It's a documented, peer-reviewed reality. In most defensive gun uses, nobody dies. The attacker sees the weapon and leaves. Gun brandished, threat ended. Clean, quiet, unreported. No crime scene tape, no press conference, just a person who went home safe because they were armed. The Las Vegas case study from 2023 makes this concrete. An armed civilian stopped an active shooter in a building lobby. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department stonewalled reporters for days and told one journalist to file an FOIA request for an event caught on camera. The Heritage Foundation asked why. The answer? It didn't fit the narrative. The acceptable narrative is that your job is to call 911 and wait. The data says otherwise. And the people controlling the data know that. When the FBI erases 75 documented interventions from its official reports, it's not failing to find the truth, it's succeeding at hiding it. Now let's talk about what this is really about, because this goes deeper than bad bookkeeping. When the government systematically erases evidence that armed citizens saved lives, it's not bad data management, it's a power move. The FBI's active shooter data feeds directly into policy. Think tanks cite it, legislators quote it. When the data is built to make armed civilians look ineffective, it creates the political conditions for restriction. And restriction always flows one direction: more state control, less individual agency. The administrative state doesn't need to lie dramatically. It just needs to count selectively. When the government tells you that you're not capable of defending others, it's making a claim about your competence as a free individual. That's a direct attack on self-determination, the right to decide in a moment of crisis how you respond to a lethal threat. Call that what it is: the state claiming ownership of your survival instinct. Armed citizens are a decentralized security network. No budget line, no response time delay, distributed across every grocery store, parking lot, and school pickup line in America. That network outperforms a centralized alternative by measurable metrics. The government buries the data and funds gun-free zones instead. And one more thing, because this channel gives partisan cover to nobody. There are Republicans in Congress right now traveling with taxpayer-funded armed security while voting against concealed carry reciprocity for their constituents. That's not conservatism. That's cronyism with a flag pin. The Second Amendment applies to every American regardless of zip code. That brings us to what's coming next, and the timeline is tighter than most people realize. This isn't a slow burn story. The clock is already ticking. In the next 6 to 12 months, H.R. 38, the Constitutional Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act, is moving through Congress. Pass it, and a permit holder in Missouri can legally carry in New York without becoming a felon at the state line. Fail it, and that patchwork of incompatible laws becomes a trap that strips legal carry rights from millions of Americans who travel for work or family. The attorneys general of 24 states have already signed a letter urging passage. The momentum is real, but so is the opposition. Over the next 2 to 5 years, if the FBI's undercutting methodology stands uncorrected, it becomes the permanent foundation for the next wave of federal gun control legislation. Every single bill will cite those false numbers. The real numbers, the 75 cases, the 45 interventions, the 8 prevented massacres, will keep getting filed under disputed while the fabricated ones get stamped official. The long-term domino: if the armed citizen gets successfully reframed from safeguard to liability, the infrastructure for the next round of restrictions is already waiting. Mandatory storage laws, firearm insurance, universal registration. Each one is a ratchet. Ratchets only turn one way. This never happens in one bill. It happens in 10. Now here's what you can actually do about it. First, stop waiting to be protected. Start preparing to protect. Get scenario-based training, not range time, scenario training. Knowing how to hit a target at 10 yards is a starting point. Knowing how to make a threat assessment, identify your backdrop, and respond under adrenaline with people screaming around you is a different skill entirely. The data shows trained concealed carriers outperform law enforcement in active shooting outcomes. That doesn't happen by accident. Know your state's law cold. Stand your ground, castle doctrine, duty to retreat. These aren't abstract. They're the difference between being called a hero and being charged with a crime for doing the right thing in the worst moment of your life. Share the stories the media won't. The CPRC maintains a documented database of armed civilian interventions. The Heritage Foundation has an interactive map. Both are free and both are sourced. Send them to the person in your life who still thinks the police will always get there in time. Don't argue, just hand them the data. And subscribe right now if you want more in-depth analyses like this, and share this video with one person who still believes the official numbers. Because the government counts every gun use in a crime. Nobody official counts the crimes that never happened because a law-abiding American was already there. I'll see you next time. Bye.